May 1987, Talladega Superspeedway, Alabama. Bobby Allison's Buick is screaming down the front stretch at 212 miles per hour when the right rear tire explodes. The car spins, goes airborne, and launches backward into the catch fence at over 200 miles per hour. Nearly 100 feet of fencing disintegrate. Flying debris rains into the grandstands. Spectators are injured. The race is red-flagged for 2 hours. NASCAR officials stand in the infield, staring at the carnage, and realize they have a terrifying problem. The cars are too fast. If Allison's car had cleared that fence, hundreds could have died. 6 months later, NASCAR mandates a solution: restrictor plates. Metal plates with 4 holes bolted between the carburetor and intake manifold to choke airflow and kill horsepower. Speeds drop instantly. Problem solved. But NASCAR made one critical mistake. They assumed teams would follow the rules. This is the story of the restrictor plate era and the ingenious, desperate, and sometimes insane ways teams tried to cheat it. Because in NASCAR, if there's a rule, there's a loophole. And if there's a loophole, someone will find it. Let's understand what NASCAR did in 1988. Restrictor plates aren't new technology. NASCAR had used them briefly in the 1970s during the transition from big block to small block engines. But after Bobby Allison's crash and Bill Elliott setting a 212 mile per hour qualifying record earlier that year, NASCAR brought them back permanently for Daytona and Talladega. The plate itself is simple: a thin piece of aluminum with 4 precisely sized holes that restrict airflow into the engine. Less air means less fuel, which means less power. Engines that normally produced 650 plus horsepower were suddenly choked down to around 450 HP. Drivers hated it immediately. Less power meant less throttle response, pack racing, and enormous crashes where 20 plus cars would wreck simultaneously. But NASCAR didn't care. Safety trumped everything. The plates were mandatory, non-negotiable, and heavily policed. NASCAR inspectors measured them with calipers before every race. The holes had to be exact. Any deviation meant instant disqualification. But teams saw an opportunity. If you could bypass the plate, even slightly, you'd have 10 to 20 extra horsepower that nobody else had. At 200 miles per hour, that's the difference between winning and finishing 10th. Here's where it gets interesting. Teams developed dozens of creative ways to cheat the restrictor plate. The hollow bolt trick. This is the most famous and most ingenious. Teams would replace the solid steel mounting bolts that held the plate to the carburetor with hollow bolts. These bolts had tiny channels drilled through them that allowed extra air to bypass the plate entirely. The beauty? NASCAR inspectors would check the plate holes with calipers, see they were legal, and approve the car. They never thought to check if the bolts themselves were hollow. The trick worked for years until someone finally got caught. Sandpaper Fingers. This one sounds like an urban legend, but was reportedly used by Dale Earnhardt's team. When teams picked up their restrictor plates from NASCAR officials before the race, the Dale Earnhardt Inc. representative allegedly had sandpaper taped to his fingertips. As he walked back to the garage, he'd rub the inside edges of the plate holes, gradually enlarging them by fractions of a millimeter. It's a microscopic advantage, but at restrictor plate tracks, microscopic is everything. Cigarette butts in the cylinders. This wasn't plate-specific, but it shows how creative teams got. When NASCAR inspected engine displacement by removing a spark plug and measuring cylinder volume, some teams would accidentally drop cigarette butts down the spark plug hole. When the piston came up, the butts compressed and gave a false displacement reading, making oversized engines appear legal. The acrylic washer ring. Teams would place transparent acrylic rings between the restrictor plate and carburetor. These rings had slightly larger holes than the plate, allowing extra airflow. Because they were clear and thin, inspectors often missed them during visual checks. The cardboard plate. Perhaps the most brazen cheat. Teams would make fake restrictor plates out of thin cardboard covered in silver foil from cigarette packages. They'd pass inspection with the real plate, then swap it for the fake one after inspection. The cardboard would disintegrate during the race from heat and airflow, essentially removing the restriction entirely. (1993) Daytona 500 week. During routine inspection, NASCAR officials discovered that Ken Schrader's Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolet has tiny holes drilled into both the carburetor and intake manifold. The holes align perfectly to channel extra air around the restrictor plate. NASCAR's reaction is nuclear. They hit Schrader and team owner Hendrick with a 4-race suspension and massive fines. The penalty is so severe because the modification was clearly intentional. Someone had precision drilled those holes specifically to circumvent the plate. Hendrick appeals, and in a rare moment, NASCAR's penalty gets partially overturned. The suspension is lifted, but the fines remain. It's one of the few times NASCAR lost an appeal during the restrictor plate era. The message was clear: cheat the plate, and NASCAR will destroy you. Then there's the story of Marty Robbins, yes, the country music legend who also raced NASCAR. During a restrictor plate race, Robbins reportedly engineered his plate to come loose and fall down into the carburetor, effectively removing the restriction. He suddenly had full power and ran at the front of the pack for the first time in his career. But here's the twist: Robbins didn't do it to win. He just wanted to know what it felt like to run up front. After a few laps, he voluntarily parked the car, walked to NASCAR officials, and turned himself in for disqualification. It's the most wholesome restrictor plate cheat in NASCAR history. By 2019, NASCAR finally replaced restrictor plates with tapered spacers, a more sophisticated airflow restriction that NASCAR claimed was harder to cheat, but the damage was done. For 31 years, the restrictor plate defined superspeedway racing. It created pack racing, massive crashes, and an entire culture of teams trying to outsmart the system. The hollow bolt trick, the sandpaper fingers, the cardboard plates. These weren't just cheats. They were engineering miracles born from desperation. Teams spent millions developing ways to gain 5 extra horsepower from a system designed to be uncheatable. And that's the legacy of restrictor plate racing. NASCAR created a rule to slow the cars down. Teams spent 30 years proving that no rule is unbreakable.